Hi, welcome to my blog. My name is Tom Shu. We're going to do a tutorial today. In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to work in Lightroom, hand the file off to Photoshop, and bring it back to Lightroom. There's some preferences you need to set up. If you click Edit, Default, and File Handling, Preferences and File Handling, it'll tell you how you're going to hand stuff off. So I'm going to be sending it out as a raw file. It's going to be handled as a TIFF. It's going to be an sRGB. It's going to be 300 DPI. Okay, you can choose PDF and you can choose different color spaces, but we're going to work in sRGB because that gamut's handled by all the printers that I use, and 300 DPI is for photo quality. So looking at this image, we're going to have to do some adjustments on it, and the reason why I'm using this flower image, there's lots of color and lots of texture, and there's some correction needs to happen. A lot of these leaves are too dark, so let's just get right started to it. Okay, so after playing with Lightroom for quite a while, Lightroom 4 I should say, the exposure slider is more like a brightness slider. I used to use it to set my white point, but now I'm using the whites to set my white point. So what I'll do is, just for the sake of editing, I'm going to bring this brightness down on this image by one stop. So I'm going to go -1, and I'm going to bring the contrast down -35, and I'll use the black point and white point to be set contrast. Okay, so we're going to hold the Alt key, and I'm going to find out where we're clipping in the image by holding the Alt key. It's going to bring a mask up, and if I slide it to the right, you'll see that now if there was something white in the image, I would be setting the white point by going over to the white and dropping it down, so I have a white reference to give a full range from darks to whites. So since there's not a white point in this image, I'm just going to use this as a clipping warning. So I know that nothing is clipped now by my whites exposure. And then I'll use the exposure slider for brightness overall if the image isn't bright enough. So now we'll set a black point. Holding down the Alt key, we'll see that there are some blacks down in here under the shadow. However, that's not a big deal. I just want to make sure I don't create it too dark and lose any detail in these leaves. Okay, and I'm going to fix how dark that is in the green when I move into Photoshop. I just want to make sure that there's data there to fix. Okay, these shadows inside the leaves don't bother me at all because that's what they are, they're shadows. Okay, so now that we've set a black point and we've set our white point, now we want to look at the detail sliders. These detail sliders, if you play with the highlight, it's not going to affect the shadow area. You notice all these dark colors, they remain unaffected. This only adjusts the detail in the highlights. So what we'll do, if you hold the Alt key, you'll see if you clip any information when you slide it over. And when I mean by clip, it means that the information's gone, it's no longer there. If I go like this, that means information in the red channel is gone, and information in the yellows are starting to be gone. So we don't want that to happen. We want to bring it up just to where it starts to clip and stop. Now the shadow area is the same thing. The shadow only affects the dark area of the image. Okay? Do you want the image to look like that? That doesn't look really realistic to me. However, I don't want it to look too dark either. Okay? So I'm going to hold the Alt key, and I'm going to find out where things clip in the shadow area. Okay? So we're losing some information in that yellow, and we could fix that in exposure if it's too dark. So again, I don't mind losing information in the shadows, so that looks pretty good to me. Let's look at this exposure slider. If we hold down the Alt key again, this is our mask, our clipping mask, to see what information is lost and not there. Looks like we're going to be losing some information in this bright area, this leaf, which that's okay. One little area is not going to make or break this image. You can't really eyeball it. You can eyeball the taste, but you can't eyeball whether information is lost by clipping. Okay, so this looks pretty good. We'll do all of our sharpening inside Photoshop. This was the focus point of the image. So at this point, we're going to look at the shadow and see if we have any noise. And there doesn't appear to be any noise. There's still some nice detail, some fuzz on the leaves, stuff like that. So we're in pretty good shape here. So to get to Photoshop, you'll hit Control or Command on a Mac, so it's Control E as in Edward, and that will hand the file right off into Photoshop. This was an image that I played with earlier in Photoshop, and we'll close that out. So here's our image. We'll zoom it in, and we'll see that this is all of the information and adjustments that we applied in Lightroom are on this image. Notice I didn't apply any clarity slider or anything like that. What I did was I left it so we can do some adjustments in Photoshop. Okay, so here we are. If you look at one down here in this dialog, it says document. It's 126.6 megs. So it's a pretty big file. So if you don't have a lot of RAM, you might want to be careful about duplicating layers, because watch what happens when I hit Control J and we'll duplicate the layer. Now we're at 253 megs, which is a pretty big file for one image. So we'll be flattening out images or flattening out layers as we go, but the reason why I create a duplicate layer by hitting Control J, and Control is Command on a Mac, is so that if I cause any problems or do any damage, that I can just delete that layer. It's kind of like a safety net. Alright, so what we'll do first is I want to do a technique that I do for adjusting color pop. I want this to pop. So what I'll do is I'll go up here and I'll click Filter, and I'll click Blur, and I'll go to Gaussian Blur. Okay, and depending on how large the file is would determine how many pixels in radius that you would use. In this one, I'm going to look at this data here and see how blurred it is. If you pull it all the way to the left, it's not very much at all. So about probably 3.5 or so would work. We'll click OK. That's going to blur that layer. And what we'll do is we'll put it as an overlay. And if you notice, these colors, they really got saturated now because everything got darker. But I don't want it to be applied all over the whole image. I want to selectively apply it. So what you do is you hold down the Alt key and you come down to this layer mask icon and you click on it. And you notice that this black reveals and white reveals. So we're going to grab the brush tool by hitting the B key. B as in boy. If you hold down the Control and Alt key, which is the Command and Option key on the Mac, you can adjust your brush size. Left and right will make the brush bigger or smaller, and up and down controls how hard the brush is. Opacity set at 50 and flow set at 50, and we're going to go click this mask, and we're on white, so that means wherever we paint, what's going to happen is it's going to cut through this mask over here and reveal that adjustment. So we're going to come here and grab some of these blues, and we're going to make those more saturated. Okay, I'm going to paint on some of these flowers, and you can see that color starting to pop. And what I wanted to do is I want this image to look three-dimensional. This one in front, this one, and I want this one in the back to be the main focus points when you look at the image. Where are you drawn to? Okay, so I'm going to burn down some of this area in here, this shadow. Okay, and start to make this stuff stand out at you a little bit more. Okay, and we'll come in here and we'll burn down these leaves. And we'll burn down this stuff in here. And when I say burn down, we're just revealing the mask and making it darker, just like we did with that color pop that I talked to you about by applying that blur. Okay. And say if you mess up on something and you want to see what your mask is actually doing, if you hold down the Alt key and you click on the mask, it will show you. So you'll see that we did paint on the flower, and if we want to get rid of some of that on the flowers, all we have to do is click the X key and it will let us paint it back, and that will get rid of any of that detail on those flowers. Bring the opacity and flow at 100, we'll completely make it black, and there will be nothing applied to those flowers. Okay, so to get out of that, you're going to hit the backslash. Okay, so I just want to apply a little bit inside here on the flower where this deep pocket is before we go into sharpening. Okay, and then we'll do a curves adjustment and adjust just the green in the image in these leaves. Okay, so again we'll go with X, and I'm gonna bring our flow back down to 30 to 50, somewhere in there. It's not critical, and I'll resize the brush, and I just want to grab some of this. I'm going to zoom in to see what I'm doing. Okay, so I want this edge just to pop off of the flower, and this is all just, you know, personal taste, how you think it should look. Okay, I want that to be a little deeper. Okay, so we're going to flatten this layer and watch what happens to our file size. We're at 295 meg. We're going to right click and we're going to type flatten image, and you'll notice we're back to 126, which is the original file size. So now we're going to sharpen this image. So I'll zoom back out so we can see it in the screen. And to sharpen it, I'm going to hit Control J to duplicate the layer, and we're going to go Filter, Other, and High Pass. Now you can see that if we go all the way to the right, that's going to create way too much sharpening. The way it works is we're going to create an overlay. I like to use a different overlay adjustment than overlay, and I'll show you which one it is in just a second. It's called linear light. So somewhere around this area, wherever you can see these points, that's where the main emphasis on the sharpening is going to be. Okay, so we don't want to like bring it all the way over here where it's like everything is all points, and that would just be way too sharp. So just look where you see the definition in your points, and that's kind of your reference for your sharpening. So it looks like somewhere around 4.5. We're going to click OK. And our overlay, if we click overlay, this is one look. And if you want to go through which ones are which, you can just hover it, and you can see that inside that overlay drop down area, there's a whole bunch of adjustments between overlay and hard mix that all are a form of overlay. And I like to use linear light. Okay, so let's zoom in and see this sharpening. Control Z, I hit the brush tool. So we'll hit Z and we'll zoom in, and you look how sharp that is on the flower. If I click this little eye, we'll make that layer disappear. So that's really, really sharp. Okay, all those little pods, they just stand out now. It's too sharp, as a matter of fact, for the whole image to look like that. So we're going to hold down the Alt key, and we'll do the same thing as before. We'll create a layer mask, and we're going to grab the white tool and the brush. We're going to zoom in and see exactly what we're doing. Okay, so here with the brush tool, by hitting the B key, I'm going to come in, I'm going to paint that sharpness where I want it only. Okay, so I'll paint a little bit in there. And I'll paint a little bit over here on this edge of these flowers, these little edge petals. And if I want to paint some on these leaves, these front leaves, I can do that. And you see that texture starts to pop out of the leaf. And I can even hit this little guy down here if I like. So let's come up here and we'll add some sharpening here. And if you want to see what you're doing, you can just turn it on and off. Okay, so if we need to add some more opacity, so speed this up a little bit, you can do that. Okay, and we'll add some over into this flower here. Okay, so I like that so far. Let's zoom out so we can see everything. Okay, so I'm going to right click. This is just to control the file size, and we're going to flatten the image. So we're going to do one more adjustment, and then we'll create a vignette and we'll hand it back to Lightroom. So I'm going to hit the curves tool. And when you hit the curves tool, it creates a mask for you. Do you see that mask? And the curves basically is this. If I grab this, this is going to be the highlight area, and this will be the shadow area. This is a histogram, just like it was in Lightroom. So I control the darks over here and the lights over there. But I don't want to affect the whole image, so I could use the mask and paint away everything except what I wanted. But let's go into the green channel. So if you just click this dot and click delete, it will get rid of that dot, and it'll get rid of that dot. So if we go, this is R, G, and B, we'll just go to the green channel, and let's pump up some of the shadows in just the green area. Okay. Now, you have to use your imagination a little bit. Imagine nothing else being affected but just these leaves. Okay. So we're going to come down to this mask and we're going to invert it. We're going to hit Control I for invert. Okay. So the information is still there, it's just covered up. So we're going to hit the brush tool, B, and we're going to come in, we're going to paint. Let me drop this opacity down a little bit. Okay, I can bring a flow up 100% and just control it by opacity. And we're going to paint in brightness on these leaves, so it's just not so dark. Okay, and just these front leaves. I don't care about those other leaves. I just want to give some depth to this image to make it look three-dimensional. Okay. Maybe some of these leaves here. But I don't want to brighten all of the leaves on the image. So if you want to go back in and click the X, you'll switch to black and you can come back in and cover up anything that you may have got sloppy on. X, I hit that one. So I want this to be dark because I want this leaf here to be the only one standing off. So I'll hit X and go back out, and I'll finish brightening this one. So we can see what we've done here to these leaves here. And if you want to look at the mask, again, you hit Alt key and click on the mask, and it shows what we revealed. Okay, and to get out, you hit backslash. So we're going to flatten this image. So we're down to a small file size. And the last thing we'll do is we'll do a vignette. And that's just to further draw us in to the image. So you make a selection. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, just a rough selection. And you go to select, and you go click refine edge. If you can't find your marching ants, you have to select it in your view. So there's our marching ants. Okay, so we know where we're at. And we're going to do smooth, and we're going to feather. That's going to round our edges. And if we want it to go out some, we're going to hit shift edge, because I'm picturing, just this part of the image to be darkened down a little bit. So might want to shift the edge a little bit more. Not quite so much. Okay, so we're going to click OK. Now, right now this selection is only selecting the inner part of this image. We want it to select the other. So we're going to hit Control Shift I, okay? And now it's selecting everything here around the edge. So we need to convert that to a selection. In that selection we're going to do this selection, we're going to convert it to a curves adjustment. So we're going to hold down that drop down menu and select curves, and now it disappears. However, if you look what happens, only the outside of the edge is being affected with our vignette. Okay, so you can bring it down as far as you want, and if you get too far with it, you can drag your opacity on that layer and get rid of it. Okay, so you can even fine-tune adjust there. And if you notice that vignette, it created a mask when we did our curves. If we hold down the Alt key, you can see where that vignette mask is specifically and is targeted. Okay, and if we wanted to open something up, we can grab our paintbrush and click on that mask and not vignette that area. Okay, so we hit the backslash key. Say for example, this leaf here, we don't want the vignette to be on it. We'll hit the black, we'll hit B for the brush tool, and we'll come over here and we'll paint on this leaf, and the vignette won't be applied. Okay, if you see our mask here, we'll just bring our opacity up. And let's get rid of the vignette altogether on that leaf. Make sure we don't have any there. And we don't want any on these flowers. I'm sure the vignette doesn't go that far, but kind of get the idea. See, if you go like that, it gets rid of the vignette. So we'll hit Control Z to get rid of that because we want that vignette there. So we'll flatten the image. And we're going to hit Control S for save, Control S, and this is going to hand it back to Lightroom. See, it says saving 91%. So if we click on Lightroom and pull up, there's the file. There's the one we created, and here's the one. You see it says edit TIFF because we saved it as a TIFF file. So, okay, we had a little screen pop there, so we saved it as a TIFF file. And if we go back over here, if we look at the number on the TIFF, it's 5873. It's 5873, which I believe is this image here. 5873. So we went from this image, we'll reset that. We're from that image to this image in Lightroom to that image as our final image. Well, hopefully that you learned some stuff today in this tutorial. I know it was a long one. It's 21 minutes long. But my name's Tom Shue, and I thank you for watching.